This is Alex Eala's moment. With our dinners, our evenings are fixated when she's playing. That's real tennis.
She walks off center court and the crowd rises to its feet, and nobody in that stadium can fully explain why a player who just lost is being cheered like she won. Hold on to that, because the answer only gets stranger the closer you look. 48 hours later, she isn't home. She isn't resting. She's on a plane, and that alone should raise a second question louder than the first. Why would anyone fly straight into one of the deepest, most dangerous tournament fields of the year, just 3 days after the hardest loss of her career? Her name is Alex. Remember that name, because by the time this ends, you'll understand why an entire diaspora rearranges its schedule around the exact minutes she steps onto a court. Let's rewind 4 days first. Wimbledon, round of 16. Alex stands across the net from Jasmine Paolini, and what unfolds is a 3-set war. The kind that hollows a player out completely, the kind where you can see on her face that she gave everything and it still slipped away. 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. She led. She had it in her hands. And then, in the final set, it disappeared. That loss should have been the entire story. Instead, cameras caught something nobody expected. The crowd standing, applauding, giving her an ovation usually reserved for champions walking off with a trophy, not a 21-year-old exiting in the 4th round. Why does a loss look like a victory lap? Sit with that question, because it's about to get heavier. Less than a day later, she posts 2 words to Instagram, written in Tagalog and English: "Everything, thank you, Wimbledon." A caption so small it should have meant nothing, and yet it spread across an entire country like scripture, because of what she just accomplished underneath the loss. She became the first Filipino singles player, man or woman, to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. Let that number sit in the air for 1 second before the next wave crashes in, because there's no time to exhale on this one. Now rewind further, 3 weeks earlier, to Berlin, and this is where the story should finally start making sense, except it immediately stops making sense again. June 17th, Alex walks onto a grass court against Elena Rybakina, a player ranked inside the world's top 10, a serve like a hammer that ends points before they even begin. Alex wins in straight sets. The very next day, an even bigger name waits across the net: Alina Svitolina, a former top 5 player, a Wimbledon semi-finalist, a career built on beating legends when it counts. Alex wins again. Back to back. 2 dangerous, grass-savvy, deeply experienced opponents dismantled in 48 hours by a player who, exactly 12 months earlier, wasn't even inside the world's top 140. Say that number slowly. 140. 12 months is the entire gap between irrelevant and world-class, and that alone should make you ask the obvious question nobody's fully answered yet: what actually happened in that window that flipped her career upside down this fast? We'll get there, but first there's a detail buried inside Wimbledon that recontextualizes everything you just heard. Before she ever faced Paolini, before the loss that somehow earned a standing ovation, Alex faced the defending champion 2 rounds earlier. Iga Swiatek, one of the most dominant players of her generation, a woman who simply does not lose to unranked outsiders, whose game has flattened fields on every surface the sport offers. Alex beat her. On grass. In straight sets. It marked her 2nd career win over Swiatek, which means this wasn't a fluke or a lucky afternoon. This was a pattern asserting itself in real time, on the sport's biggest stage, with the entire tennis world watching. After that win, at the podium, she said something short and sharp that spread across social media faster than the scoreline itself, a line about refusing to shrink herself on court when the moment gets big. It wasn't a slogan for the cameras. It was a warning to everyone still left in the draw. And that's exactly what makes what happened next so disorienting, because 3 days after beating a defending Grand Slam champion, she loses to Paolini. Peak, then fall. Fall, then a standing ovation for the fall. Nothing about this story lets you settle into a rhythm long enough to relax, and that's the entire point, because right now she's landing in Washington, D.C., and what's waiting for her there is not a soft landing built for recovery. It's one of the most stacked 500-level fields the tour has assembled in years. 7 players ranked inside the world's top 20 are entered. Alina Svitolina, the same woman Alex just beat in Berlin, walks back in with a motive now, a scalp she wants back. Marta Kostyuk is there. Naomi Osaka, a 2-time major champion still clawing to remind the sport who she used to be, is there. Iva Jovic, the rising American teenager the entire tour keeps watching, is there. Jasmine Paolini herself, the very player who ended her Wimbledon run, is somewhere in that same tournament pool. Diana Schneider, Anna Kalinskaya, Madison Keys, Leylah Fernandez, Clara Tauson, Emma Navarro, and Venus Williams, 46 years old, a name that still silences stadiums the moment it's announced, stepping back onto the exact court where she made her comeback the year before. Read that lineup again slowly and ask yourself honestly, does a 21-year-old who just emptied her tank on grass have anything left in reserve for this? History says no. History has a specific memory it keeps dragging back into every conversation about her. A stretch a year ago where a brutal back-to-back schedule finally caught up with her body, where the accumulated weight of consecutive tournaments broke something down that couldn't be pushed through. That memory hangs over Washington like a shadow nobody's willing to name out loud. But here's the twist buried inside the numbers, the part almost nobody's talking about loud enough. She isn't walking into this draw as a wild card, an invitation, a courtesy entry handed out because organizers wanted a feel-good headline. Direct entries into that main draw are earned strictly through ranking, and Alex was one of them. No asterisk beside her name. No favor pulled. 12 months ago she sat outside the top 140 in the world. Today she's ranked 32, and that number alone bought her the seat at this table. She earned the door herself. Nobody opened it for her. So now a harder question surfaces, one that reaches beyond tennis entirely. Why does a single athlete from a country of over 100 million people carry this much emotional gravity every single time she steps onto a court? And the answer doesn't start in a stadium. It starts at an airport. Because that's where this exact scene keeps repeating, city after city, almost like a ritual nobody planned but everybody shows up for anyway. Madrid, fans packed the arrivals gate. Paris, the same scene filmed, shared, replayed until it became something bigger than a video clip. Bad Homburg, a smaller German event nobody outside hardcore tennis circles would normally notice, and still the crowd came, flags raised, voices loud enough to be heard from the practice courts. Wimbledon, international press specifically wrote about the wall of Filipino support ringing the grounds, a phenomenon significant enough that outlets far outside sports coverage picked it up and ran with it. And now Washington, D.C. sits directly in the path of that same pattern, because the D.C. metro region holds one of the densest concentrations of Filipino Americans anywhere in the country. If the pattern holds, and it has held every single time, the fences surrounding the tennis center are about to fill with people who've never watched a competitive tennis match in their lives, showing up anyway, because for them this stopped being about tennis a long time ago. It became about watching someone from home walk into rooms people from home rarely get invited into. But stay with this, because underneath the crowds and the flags and the airport chants sits something quieter, something far less visible, the architecture actually shaping how she plays. She has trained since she was 13 years old at an academy in Spain built around one of the most decorated coaching legacies the sport has ever produced, a lineage responsible for shaping 22 Grand Slam titles in a single career. That connection isn't a footnote. It's structural. It's been quietly present since long before most casual fans ever learned her name, sharpening the exact foundation underneath everything you just watched unfold in Berlin and at Wimbledon. And that's the detail that should genuinely unsettle her upcoming opponents in Washington, because the wins over Rybakina, over Svitolina, over Swiatek aren't the ceiling of what this is building toward. They're the earliest visible results of a system engineered for exactly this kind of moment, only now beginning to show what it was built to produce. Now zoom out, because Washington isn't a finish line. It's the opening gate of something far bigger stretching out ahead of her. After D.C., the schedule doesn't ease. It tightens. The National Bank Open in Toronto follows almost immediately after. Then Cincinnati arrives in August. Then, closing out the summer, the U.S. Open, the final Grand Slam of the year, the tournament every player circles the moment the season begins. 3 consecutive high-pressure events, back-to-back-to-back, all on hard courts, the exact surface and the exact kind of accumulated fatigue that broke her down a year earlier. So here's the real question underneath all of this, the one that should keep you watching until the very last second. Is this the summer she finally proves that collapse was a lesson learned and left behind, or is this the summer the same schedule catches up with her again, right when the entire world is finally paying attention? Because make no mistake, the world is watching in a way it simply wasn't 12 months ago. Prize pools tied to events she competes in have grown. Broadcasters have started prioritizing markets they used to ignore entirely. Every packed fence line, every fresh viral airport clip, is quietly reshaping how much value this sport places on reaching an audience it spent decades overlooking. She isn't just playing matches anymore. She's become proof of concept for an entire region the sport is trying to unlock, and every point she plays in Washington carries that weight, whether she asked to carry it or not. And still, after the ranking climb, after the wins over Rybakina and Svitolina and Swiatek, after a standing ovation for a loss that somehow felt like a victory, there's one detail refusing to let this story rest easy, one thing keeping it from becoming a clean, comfortable underdog tale. She lost her last match. Not to a nobody. Not in a moment that didn't matter. She lost on center court at Wimbledon, with the entire tennis world watching, after leading, after having the match in her grasp, and she still couldn't close it out. That isn't a footnote you can wave away. That's precisely the fracture point history insists should widen under pressure, should crack further the moment the stakes rise again, and the stakes are about to rise higher than almost anything she's faced. So picture it. The fences are already filling outside a tennis center sitting blocks from the Philippine embassy, inside the political capital of the country holding the largest Filipino population outside the Philippines itself. A 21-year-old walks out for a first-round match carrying more than a racket. She's carrying a flag, a diaspora's undivided attention, a coaching legacy's quiet investment, and the still open wound of a loss she hasn't fully answered yet. Somewhere in that draw, Svitolina is waiting with a Berlin memory she once erased. Somewhere in that draw, the ghost of last year's physical collapse is waiting to see if history simply repeats itself. And somewhere in the stands, thousands of people who will never play a competitive point of tennis in their entire lives are about to hold their breath every single time she tosses the ball to serve. Not because they understand the technical gap between a cross-court backhand and a clean down-the-line winner, but because for them, every point she wins feels like something much bigger winning alongside her. That's the whiplash this story keeps refusing to resolve. Peak, then fall, then an ovation for the fall, then a field engineered specifically to test whether that fall was temporary or permanent. And here's the final twist. The one that ties everything back to where we started. The reason that Wimbledon crowd rose to its feet for a losing player was never really about that single match. It was about what everyone in that stadium already sensed as she walked off the court, that this wasn't an ending at all. It was a pause. A breath before the next chapter began. Because the girl who boarded a flight 48 hours after the biggest loss of her career, who didn't go home to process it quietly, who flew straight toward one of the deepest fields she's ever faced, was never running from that Wimbledon loss to begin with. She was running toward the next chance to answer it. And whether Washington finally gives her that answer, a deep run that silences the fatigue narrative for good, or an early exit that proves history was right all along, is a question nobody watching from outside that stadium gets to know yet. Not until she walks onto that court. Not until the first ball is struck and the first point is decided. All anyone can do right now is watch the gates, watch the fences fill, watch a 21-year-old carry the weight of an entire diaspora onto a hard court in the capital of a country that will be judging every single swing, and wait to see which version of Alex actually shows up. The one who beat two ranked killers back-to-back in Berlin. Or the one who couldn't hold a lead against Paolini when it mattered most. Because both of those players are real. Both exist inside the same 21-year-old right now, in the same body, on the same flight that just landed. And Washington is about to find out, in front of everyone watching, which one is finally in control.